All right, at long last, we can finally get started. This is only about 2 months behind schedule, I think, so far, but our dozer guy finished up, maybe a couple weeks ago. Unfortunately, right as he got done, the girls went to virtual learning, and given that I am the one not gainfully employed at the moment, I got to be the school teacher. So we got past that, or at least got it passed on to Grandma, who's now taken over. And I'm now out here getting the building squared up to hopefully dig and pour the footing for the foundation later on this week. So Dad and I spent the last couple days getting everything squared up and laid out. So we've got our string lines run all along the outside of where our footing is going to be. Okay, these are nailed to these boards, and everything is measured out exactly the distance from string to string that we want for our outside footing dimensions. We've also had to go through and measure and use a little trigonometry that I never thought I'd use again, and they use the Pythagorean theorem to figure out what our diagonal dimensions are from here to each corner. We've gone through and measured that to check and make sure that's square. So our end result should be that we have a perfectly square and perfectly rectangular house. So one of my former coworkers named Tom Pignone, he used to joke about some of the work we did, about how we were measuring things with a micrometer. We were marking it with a can of spray paint and cutting it with an axe, and that's almost exactly what we're doing right here. We've measured our lines down to the 1/4 inch, and so our strings are aligned perfectly and all have exact perfect dimensions. To mark it, I'm using this can of spray paint, which, that's not quite as accurate as a 1/4 inch string. So we set this right up against it, hit spray, and roll along. And that gives us a line of where exactly we're supposed to be digging all the way across. Okay, we've got everything trenched out and evened up. So right now, what we're needing to do is put in where our water line is going to come into the house. So we're going to drill a well right up on top of that hill, the well house somewhere up in there. Hadn't got it figured out exactly because we need to see where our electric line is going to be first, but roughly it'll be coming in right here. This is exactly where it's going to come into the house. Come in 8 foot. Well, you can't see my string, but the edge of our foot wall is right there. So from here, it needs to be exactly 8 foot to where it's going to come in just outside of a wall within the utility room. So we'll need to tee this up and come up into the slab, and that'll be our main water line for the house. Same thing for the sewer. It's not as precise. It's going to go out somewhere over there. We've got another trench dug. It's a 4-inch sewer pipe, and that is going to go out to our septic tank further down the hill. We've got holes dug. We've got everything leveled out as well as we're going to get it, and then we're in the process of putting rebar down. So let me show you what we've got here. There's our pile of rebar. It's kind of a mix, but for the most part, it's this really big honking stuff. There's my finger for reference. So this is an inch thick rebar. That's a number 8, I believe, is what the rebar size is. That's way bigger than we are actually supposed to be using. This footing calls for about a 1/2 inch, a number 4 rebar at the most. So we have kind of over-engineered it, but given how much weight it's going to be supporting, I'm comfortable going heavier than lighter. So that should give us a really strong footing to hold up our slab and ultimately our walls. So we've got a trench dug all the way around. Okay, so that goes to the whole outline of the house. This is a foot deep into the ground. So that's going to give us a footing that is 1 foot deep. This is 2 foot wide. It's actually more like 25 inches when you count for the sides of the big O bucket on that track hoe that we use to scoop it out. And then we are going through and putting our rebar. So we've got these supports. Let me show you some that are already put up. We've got supports hammered into the ground. These are then tied to a cross member, which then holds up three pieces of rebar that run the entire length of the trench. So these spaces we're hanging it from, those are spaced at 8 foot intervals. So that should give us this, given how rigid this stuff is, that's probably more than close enough. That should help everything stay up off the bottom of the ground. So when we pour, concrete will go down underneath it and not leave the rebar touching dirt. Anywhere you have metal touching dirt, over time, water gets to and it starts to rust it out, and it can ruin your foundation. So that's what we've got. So you see some paint in the hole there. We've also gone through, and anywhere we've got a low spot, we've tried to use ground marking paint to highlight that so we can come back later and throw some sand in to try and level it out a little bit. That doesn't help it structurally, but that does save us a little bit of concrete. All of these little holes that are an inch or two deeper, they can add up to several extra yards of concrete. Okay, we've talked about our rebar and how we're landed in here. One other thing I mentioned briefly, but I didn't actually show you, is we have a random channel cut through where our footwall is going to be, with a 4-inch pipe sticking out of it. That is going to be our sewer line. So you can't see it on the video, but it is tilted to where it is tilting downhill in that direction, which that's downhill. The reason is that lets gravity drain that thing. So whenever we flush a toilet, we run water down a sink, no pump is required to get the water out of the house. Gravity drains it this way. So on this end, we'll connect another 4-inch line, probably at a 45-degree angle, and send it off that way to where we're eventually going to put a septic tank. Otherwise, we end up in that tree, and that's not a good thing to have septic lines hitting a tree.